Welcome to the CACFP Policy and Procedures Manual, Chapter 13, Multi-Site Sponsors Training, presented by the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs. This training provides you with an overview of Chapter 13 of the manual, titled Multi-Site Sponsors. In this session, we will go over what is considered a multi-site sponsor, the additional requirements for multi-site sponsors, the role of the site monitor, conducting pre-approval visits, and using the site monitoring form, including how to review supporting documents, complete a 5-day reconciliation, and go over a sample completed site monitoring review form. Let's start with some definitions. A site is a place that has its own physical address and administers reimbursable meals for CACFP. Therefore, a multi-site sponsor is a child nutrition program sponsor that has more than one CACFP-approved site. Sites can either be affiliated or unaffiliated. An affiliated site is a site that is owned in whole or in part by a CACFP sponsoring organization, meaning that it is a legal entity of the sponsor, while an unaffiliated site is a site that is legally distinct from its sponsoring organization. Sponsors with unaffiliated sites have additional responsibilities compared to sponsors with only affiliated sites. Refer to the CACFP Policies and Procedures Manual, Chapter 13 for more information. When a sponsor adds one or more sites, they become a multi-site sponsor. There will be additional requirements beyond the ones that single-site sponsors have. Here are some of the requirements. It includes submitting an updated management plan to ODE-CNP, which reflect the changes in the program. Multi-site sponsors will also need to submit an annual budget to ODE-CNP every year. In addition, sponsors will need to add sites and identify whether they are affiliated or unaffiliated sites on CNP Web, train site monitors, have a pre-approval site review at new sites, and have a schedule for conducting site monitoring throughout the year. This training will focus on site monitoring, which makes up a large part of the additional requirements for multi-site sponsors. Having a trained site monitor will be very important since they will be the ones that ensure your participants are receiving the benefits of the CACFP and that your program is in compliance with meal requirements. Meal requirements include verifying required components are offered for the CACFP meal pattern, creditable foods are served in adequate serving sizes, meals are consistent with menus, valid medical statements are on file, and the correct meal service style is used. The role can be difficult since the site monitor will need to maintain a balance between being a trainer and compliance officer while representing your sponsoring organization. Note that the site monitor cannot be a staff member at the site they are monitoring, and they must be an employee of the sponsor because CACFP management may not be contracted out to another entity. When new sites are added to the program, site monitors are responsible for completing a pre-approval visit prior to getting site approval from ODE. This 2-page form includes basic requirements that are needed to operate CACFP successfully, including site details, site approval information, meal service information, food safety and sanitation checks, administrative requirements, civil rights requirements, record-keeping requirements, and staff training requirements. All sites are unique, so site monitors are welcome to review for additional information that will help set up the site for success. This form can be downloaded from the ODE-CNP CACFP Forms Documents Handbooks and Manual page. Site monitoring reviews are required to be conducted 3 times a year at all sites, and 2 of the 3 reviews per site must be unannounced. An unannounced review means that the site staff are not notified before the review occurs. Unannounced reviews should be unpredictable so the site monitor can observe usual practices at the site. One of the 2 unannounced reviews must include a meal service observation. For best practice, it is recommended that all site monitoring reviews should be unannounced and include a meal service observation. School food authorities that are operating at risk after school sites may complete one of the 3 required reviews at the same time as their NSLP site monitoring visit. School districts who elect to streamline their site monitoring visits must apply this to a review without a meal service observation. The site monitoring reviews must not be more than 6 months apart using operating months only, and new sites should be reviewed within the first 4 weeks of operation. For example, a site that closes during July and August can schedule a review for October 15th, February 7th, and September 20th. This is the site monitoring form. Sponsors must use this form since it contains all required components of a site monitoring review. This form can also be downloaded from the ODE CNP CACFP Forms Documents Handbooks and Manual page. Parts of the form can be completed by the site monitor prior to going on site. You will want to focus on problems that were present during the last monitoring review and make sure those problems have been corrected during this current review. The site monitor will review licensing information, menus, medical statements, meal counts, and attendance records. Staff training documentation should be reviewed to make sure all staff have had annual training. Site monitors should check if there are any claim reconciliation issues between meals claimed and available records. Before going on site, it is important to check CNP Web to make sure that the meal times listed on CNP Web are accurate. If there are any discrepancies that arise during the review of documentation, make notes on technical assistance or training that you will need to provide. For a full list of all records to be reviewed, check the CACFP Policies and Procedures Manual, Chapter 13, Section B. Once the site monitor is on site, check any documentation that were not able to be reviewed off-site. If a meal observation is required, observe the entire meal service and check that the meal matches the written menu and that the meal service is correctly implemented. Food safety and sanitation should be checked, and the monitor should note if civil rights requirements were met. Records that are kept on site should be reviewed at this time, and if the site had problems previously, the monitor should check to make sure that all problems have been resolved. Finally, a 5-day reconciliation should be completed if it had not been previously completed during the pre-review preparation. A 5-day reconciliation is a chart that determines if the meal counts are accurate. It is a required component of all site monitoring reviews. This is the table for the 5-day reconciliation that is on the site monitoring form. The site monitor will pick a consecutive 5-day period of time within the current or previous month to see if the meal counts are accurate based on the attendance records for those same 5 days. To complete the 5-day reconciliation chart, you will need the number of enrolled participants and/or licensed capacity information, the attendance records, and the meal count records for the 5 consecutive days that were chosen. Note that this can be done prior to the review as a desk audit if the site monitor has access to the records. The 5-day reconciliation has 5 steps. First, pull the attendance and meal count records for 5 consecutive days within the current or previous month. The 5 days should be the 5 days of service prior to the review for the current month or the last 5 days of service for the prior month. Next, compare the attendance for those 5 days to the number of enrolled children at the site. Attendance should not be higher than enrollment. Then compare your attendance to the licensed capacity. Again, the attendance should be equal or less than enrollment and capacity, whichever is lower. Then fill out your table using the meal counts and attendance numbers. Finally, compare your meal counts to the attendance. If your meal counts are higher than your attendance, then you will disallow the meals and/or snacks that were claimed in excess of attendance. Meals that are served in excess of attendance are not allowed to be claimed as reimbursable meals. The site monitor will have to disallow these meals on the table for meal disallows, which can be found on the site monitoring form. To disallow a meal, the sponsor should have a system for recording disallowed meals on meal count forms. In addition to using the table of meal disallows to ensure these meals are not claimed for reimbursement during meal count reconciliation and claiming at a later date. In addition to disallowing these meals, the site monitor should speak to the classroom teacher or staff who is in charge of the meal count and attendance to find out where the problem is occurring. Additional training may be required. Besides the 5-day reconciliation, other meals might be disallowed by the site monitor as well. This may be due to many reasons, but a sample of some common reasons for disallowing meals can include missing meal components, inadequate portion sizes, point of service meal count errors, and non-creditable food substitutes served without a completed medical statement on file. Now that we have gone through the general requirements for completing a site monitoring review, let's look at a sample site monitoring form that has been completed. Here is the first page of the site monitoring form. In this example, the site monitor is visiting the Sunshine Center for the first monitoring visit of the fiscal year. Site monitoring is required to be conducted at every site, and the site monitor should schedule their reviews for the year in advance. Sponsors can print out all copies of site monitor review forms and fill out the site names and addresses in the top section of the form to help facilitate scheduling. The site monitor will enter the date of their visit and their arrival time. When they are leaving, they will enter the time of their departure. Check the corresponding box if this is one of the 3 regularly scheduled visits or an additional follow-up visit to provide technical assistance or to check on implementation. For school districts, if this is a site that is being reviewed at the same time as an NSLP visit, check the Aligned with NSLP Visit box. Next, check if this is an announced or unannounced visit. Remember, at least 2 of the 3 visits must be unannounced. For best practice, all visits should be unannounced. Moving down to Section 1 on licensing, alternate approval, or other federal, state, or local approval. The sample form has been filled out for a sponsor who is OCC licensed. Sponsors who have alternate approval or other federal, state, or local approval can fill out the applicable lines. Sections that are not applicable to the site should have a NA listed, and site monitors should write a short comment indicating why the section does not apply. If you are uncertain about how your site qualifies, review the CACFP Policies and Procedures Manual, Chapter 2, Application and Renewal. Next, in Section 2 of the form, one of the 2 unannounced visits must include a meal observation. For best practice, all visits should include a meal observation. When conducting a meal observation, make sure that the meal times are marked. The site monitor will want to check CNP Web before the visit to make sure that it is up to date. If there is a discrepancy, make sure to update the site info sheet. On your form, check which type of meal service style is used and which meal the site monitor is observing. The site monitor will want to check what has been planned for the day before the meal observation, and once at the site, observe whether the meal that is served matches the written menu. The form on the screen shows that the planned menu was bean and cheese burrito, lettuce salad with salsa, apple slices, and milk. The menu served had a change from apple slices to pears. While this change is minor and does not change the creditability, always check to make sure that the menu served meets the CACFP meal pattern and the portions served are adequate for the age group. It is highly recommended for site monitors to bring the CACFP food chart to the site review as reference. When you observe any changes to the actual menu, make sure that a working menu is updated for your records. Stay for the entire meal and make sure that all requirements are met, including point of service meal counts. Write down notes on the report if you observe any problems with meeting CACFP requirements at the site. Address all problems either on site or follow up at a later date. Going down to the bottom of the page in Section 3, make sure all food safety regulations are being observed. In our example, we were able to check yes for all questions. This should be done after reviewing the meal service, prep areas, and food storage locations. On the second page, we have sections 4 through 7. Section 4 is on the Building for the Future poster. Check to see if the poster is displayed at a location visible to the public. Check also if the WIC flyers are posted or if WIC brochures are distributed. This section may not be applicable if you are serving adult participants only. In Section 5, we look at civil rights. Check to see if the And Justice for All poster is displayed at a location visible to the public. Ask your staff if they understand the civil rights procedure and are able to locate the civil rights log. Make sure the civil rights complaint forms are available in other languages if needed. At the bottom of the section, there is a question about ensuring that water is offered to all participants in care throughout the day. This question is not applicable to adult daycare programs. Parts of record keeping can be completed before the review during a desk audit. If records are not available prior to the visit, they can be reviewed while on site. In this example on Section 6 for the record keeping section, while the site staff documented substitutions on the working menu, they failed to collect a valid medical statement for a child who was served almond milk in place of fluid milk. In addition, after reviewing meal counts and attendance records, the site monitor found out that attendance records are not being accurately maintained for all participants, resulting in errors with the 5-day reconciliation. No infants are in care for this example, so the monitor can click on Not Applicable for the infant menu questions. Sponsors who collect child or adult enrollment forms will want to check to see that it includes all required information, including the first name, last name, normal days and hours of care, as well as the meals normally received while in care. It is especially important to ensure that the documentation has been updated and signed and dated by the parent or guardian on an annual basis. If this documentation does not apply to your site type, the site monitor can also check Not Applicable. In the final question for this section, it asks about vended meals. In this case, the site does not vend meals. Click on Not Applicable. Section 7 is on staff training. Check to make sure that staff have been trained on CACFP guidelines based on their assigned duties. This should include all new staff as well. Are the staff familiar with the types and quantities required for CACFP meal service? If there are consistent errors with meeting CACFP guidelines when it comes to meal service or record keeping, staff retraining might be required for all site staff. If sites are provided with vended meals, make sure that staff understand what to do if there are missing components, spoiled foods, or if the meals do not show up at all. In this case, we can check Not Applicable since this site does not have vended meals. On page 3, we have sections 8 and 9 and 2 tables. Write down any notes or comments for your review under section 8, Comments. Make sure to note any training that was provided or any follow-up technical assistance that is needed. If disallowing any meals, note it here as well. In the example, you can see that staff was retrained on collecting medical statements for a child that was served almond milk, which resulted in a non-creditable component for the meals. Without the medical statement, the meal is missing the fluid milk component. The site monitor will follow up in a few days to make sure that the medical statement was collected and on file. In addition, attendance was not accurate, as we will see when we look at the 5-day reconciliation. Retraining was required there as well. Site monitors should carefully review this section prior to future reviews to see if problems from previous reviews have been corrected. In section 9 on follow-ups from the last visit, the site monitor looked at the last review in the previous fiscal year and noted that the point of service meal count was not done correctly last time, but it was correctly implemented this time. If there had been findings on the same issue, more robust trainings and corrective actions would be necessary. Next, we have a completed 5-day reconciliation table. The site monitor used the attendance record and the meal count record for all classrooms and filled out the chart for the meals and snacks that were claimed for CACFP reimbursement. Site monitors can choose 5 consecutive days in the current or previous month. If the 5 days are in the current month, it should be the 5 service days prior to the day of the review. If the 5 days are in the previous month, it should be the last 5 service days of the month. At this site, breakfast, lunch, and PM snacks are served. Look at the highlighted meal counts for PM snacks. Do you notice anything strange about the meal count numbers? The issue here is that meal counts are higher than the attendance. Meal counts greater than attendance are suspect, since you cannot serve meals to participants that are not present or claim more than one meal of the same meal type per participant. If you recall from Section 6, Record Keeping on page 2, there are questions on the accuracy of attendance records and the 5-day reconciliation. In this example, the site monitor asked the room teacher why there were higher meal counts than attendance, and the reason provided was that she forgot to update the attendance of the participants who arrived late to their room. This meant that at least one participant was not marked on the attendance for 4 days. These snacks in excess of recorded attendance will have to be disallowed because the attendance record does not support the number of snacks served. All disallows must be noted on the table for meal disallows below the 5-day reconciliation table. In this table, it includes disallows for the 5-day reconciliation and the disallows for serving almond milk without a medical statement on file during that same 5-day period. All disallows should have reasons noted on the site monitoring review form in the next page under the justification section. Let's look at what was written in this section. Comments included justifications for disallowed meals. The next time the site monitor is on review at the site, they should visit the same classroom to ensure that attendance records are up to date and that medical statements are on file. At the end of the site review, go over your findings with the site representative. This may be a site supervisor, a lead teacher, a program supervisor, or any staff who is in charge of overseeing CACFP operations at the site. Make sure that you sign and date the form, and have the site supervisor sign and date the form as well. Once you are done with your review, remember to add your time departed on the first page. Sponsors are required to use the ODE CNP provided forms. If sponsors would like to make minor adjustments to the forms to better suit your programming needs, contact your assigned child nutrition specialist for approval. So in this training, we learned that a multi-site sponsor is a sponsor with more than one CACFP approved site. We learned that multi-site sponsors have additional requirements, including pre-approvals and site monitoring. Site monitoring will require having a site monitor who can monitor each site at least 3 times a year with at least 2 unannounced visits and 1 meal observation. Finally, we went over the site monitoring review form that the site monitor will complete. Information for multi-site sponsors can be found in the CCFP Policy and Procedures Manual. The At-Risk After-School Care Handbook provides additional information for at-risk after-school sponsors. All resources are available as links on the ODE CNP CACFP website. Before we end our session, here's a short message from the Oregon Department of Education. ODE supports equity and excellence for every learner and seeks to work with school districts, education service districts, and community partners like you. We believe all children should have access to a high-quality, well-rounded learning experience. Our stance is that education equity is the equitable implementation of policy, practices, procedures, and legislation that translates into resource allocation, education rigor, and opportunities for historically and currently marginalized youth, students, and families, including civil rights protected classes. This means the restructuring and dismantling of systems and institutions that create the dichotomy of beneficiaries and the oppressed and marginalized. For more CACFP training videos, go to the ODE CNP CACFP training page. This institution is an equal opportunity provider.